All right. That was Gloria's band. That song is called Grand Cross. And I'm Jayme CheeseSlice. Hi. Good to see everybody. I'm the engineer producer for the show today. And before we get started, I just want to let you all know YouTube has changed the way things work. And now, essentially, views are only counted if they are engaged views, which means if YouTube's going to count it, you as a viewer need to hit the like button or subscribe or at least leave a comment in the chat or a comment on the video. And then you could just say hi everybody and then that's all you have to say. But we really are going to need your participation for engaged views so we can keep the channel going on YouTube. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and bring on our hosts for the show today. We've got Gloria Guillo. How are you doing?
Hey, Jayme.
And Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov. Thank you guys for being here today. We're going to be talking about the JFK Jr. plane crash and the Edward Kennedy car crash, which are separated by almost exactly 30 years. And we're going to decide if there's something a little bit fishy going on with those. So you guys are going to get into it. Take it away. 1 hour. I'll be back on and we'll wrap things up. Let's do this for the radio.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. No, you haven't misdialed. We were formerly left on left. I'm Gloria Guillo, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov. The opinions you hear are ours, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. Our content is intended for informational and educational purposes only, not professional advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. In observance of the anniversary of JFK's downed plane and Ted Kennedy's car crash, which both occurred in mid-July, but 30 years apart, let's look to see if we can spot the CIA's fingerprints and piece together possible deep state motives. You see, in politics, small planes don't just crash. They conveniently remove obstacles. Over and over, reformers, dissenters, and dynasty disruptors fall from the sky just when their presence becomes a threat to entrenched power. The media calls it bad luck, pilot error, but when the pattern repeats, always in what seems the deep state's favor, the word accident starts to look more like narrative management. This week marks 26 years since John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane crashed on July 16, 1999. At 38, JFK Jr. was more than Camelot's golden son. He was the founder of George magazine, which hinted at deeper corruption beneath the polished surface of American politics. In mid-1999, he was reportedly preparing to run for U.S. Senate, a move that would have put him directly in the path of Hillary Clinton's planned candidacy in New York. But that wasn't the full threat. JFK Jr. was reportedly investigating his father's assassination. He allegedly possessed files implicating George H.W. Bush, a former CIA director, in covert plots against JFK, plots the agency had buried for decades. According to several sources, Kennedy planned to expose Bush Sr. through George magazine. The crash occurred shortly after his son, George W. Bush, launched his presidential campaign. As expected, the official story was pilot error. Despite having made the route many times, Kennedy supposedly lost control in hazy skies. But radar data showed a rapid vertical plunge, and the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, satellite recorded a flash from the aircraft. Yet within hours, the media was already blaming Kennedy, shaping the public's memory around recklessness and hubris. Anomalies were buried, the narrative locked in. 3 years later, it happened again. Senator Paul Wellstone, a Minnesota progressive, died in a small plane crash just days before the 2002 election. Wellstone was a powerful voice against the Iraq War. In fact, the only senator facing re-election who had voted against the war resolution. His plane went down in fair weather with 2 experienced pilots aboard. No distress call, no fire, just silence, and then a crater. The FBI was on scene almost immediately. Before local responders, within hours, outlets were floating the familiar refrain, pilot error. And just like that, a crucial anti-war vote vanished, and Bush administration's war march continued without pause. And there's some more. Mel Carnahan, Missouri governor, died in a plane crash weeks before his 2000 Senate race against John Ashcroft. He still won posthumously, but the confusion and power vacuum helped install Ashcroft as U.S. Attorney General. Hale Boggs, House Majority Leader and Warren Commissioner member, who later questioned the official JFK narrative, disappeared over Alaska in 1972. His body and the plane were never found. Senator John Tower, blocked from becoming Secretary of Defense and vocal about corruption in the Pentagon contracting, died in a 1991 crash. Michael Connell, GOP IT specialist tied to election rigging allegations in Ohio, crashed in 2008 after reportedly being threatened not to testify. In each case, the media aggressively pushed pilot error, reinforcing a sense of inevitable tragedy while concealing anomalies that contradicted official explanations. Questions about timing, radar signatures, black boxes, or investigative irregularities were dismissed as conspiratorial noise. But pattern recognition is not paranoia. These figures weren't hobby pilots joyriding into storms. They were political actors approaching critical leverage points, elections, revelations, or votes. And every time, the crash came first. So when planes fall and history shifts in favor of empire, it's worth asking, are we watching the chaos of chance or the choreography of control? Thank you. Jeremy, please bring us up to speed with some of the details. Thank you.
Okay, well, and yeah, I've been researching for a book on political assassinations called Assassinations as American as Apple Pie, challenging the myth of American exceptionalism, that, politics is violent in other countries and we're some kind of model democracy. And yeah, actually it seemed that plane crashes is a CIA favored method of assassination because, people, it's easy to claim that it was a crash. Yeah, they keep pushing the line about pilot error, and people are prone to believe that, it was a crash, that, a small plane inevitably a lot of time will crash. So they don't think much of it when you hear, when people hear on the news, oh, it was a plane crash. They don't think it could have been an assassination. And, to add to your list, I'm finding more and more. I just wrote a review that will be published in the fall on Walter Reuther, was a liberal labor leader in the 50s and 60s, who was at odds with the Nixon administration, and his plane went down. And there's a new book that provides strong evidence of sabotage on his airplane that really deflated the labor movement and paved the way for a rightward shift in American politics. So that's just one other case. There's the case of Dorothy Hunt, who was the wife of CIA operative E. Howard Hunt. She was exposing the Watergate scandal and corruption in the Nixon administration. Her plane went down, and there were a number of other people on her plane, who were whistleblowers or news reporters. And we may do separate episodes on those plane crashes. And yeah, I think more and more are coming to acknowledge this systemic pattern of corruption and violence at the core of what one might call the deep state. There's been a reluctance, certainly academics and mainstream media have been reluctant to ever pursue investigation into these cases. And that's why more and more people in society mistrust those elements and more are coming to see how academia is as corrupt as the media. Now, getting into the JFK case, JFK Jr., I mean, we can go into a lot of the details. I mean, what was clear that this guy was primed for politics. I mean, he was an heir of the Kennedy dynasty. He was a dashing young man. He had movie star good looks. He was well educated, articulate. He was trained as a lawyer, but then he founded George magazine, which was a very, if you look at the back issues, it was really an impressive magazine that mixed kind of, lighthearted articles about I mean, it was very glossy. So it would attract a wide audience, maybe compete with like People magazine, those kind of publications. Had, breezy style of writing, but there was some substantive journalism that was being published in that magazine. And they published Oliver Stone. And, JFK Jr., had a suspicion about the CIA and his uncle and father. And he actually said, Bobby knew everything. And, Bobby Kennedy. And that's why Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, because he was going to reopen the investigation. And so, he was using the magazine to publish an article by Oliver Stone. He hired, who was, did the film JFK and was trying to uncover the truth behind the JFK assassination conspiracy. He had hired before his death Wayne Madsen, who was an investigative journalist who exposed Barack Obama's ties to the CIA and wrote a hard-hitting book on the Congo and how the CIA and Clinton administration was supporting Rwanda's invasion of Congo and death squad operations. And so Madsen was a real investigative journalist who exposed real corruption and immoral practices by the governing elite. So JFK Jr. hired him. And he was being given information about the JFK assassination, his father's assassination, and also, as you pointed out, George H.W. Bush's role in the assassination, which a lot of JFK expert researchers find a connection and believe that George H.W. Bush had some involvement in that plot, along with some other CIA operatives. And he was connected both with the Texas oil interests around Lyndon Johnson, who were central players, as well as the CIA operatives. He had been a CIA operative going back to the late 50s and CIA director. So this was a pretty hard-hitting magazine, and that's what I think scared the elite, that this magazine would expose the CIA, and that, as you pointed out, JFK Jr. was planning to enter politics. He had an exploratory meeting to run for Senate against Daniel Patrick Moynihan's former seat, to run against Hillary Clinton, who was planning to run, or alternatively to run for New York governor, which was a stepping stone to the presidency for Theodore Roosevelt and Grover Cleveland for him. So that's why they had to mobilize an action. And if you look at the evidence, it seems clear that there was a cover-up and that it was not pilot error. In fact, I think key evidence is that very shortly before the plane went down, because JFK Jr. was piloting the plane, there was a radio call to air traffic control. And it was a very calm message, just calm communications, no distress signal, no sign of distress at all. And this was just a few minutes before the crash and before he was planning to land. But then they suppressed this. It was suppressed from news agencies, even though there was a record of this call and it was reported on. And the plane, rapidly went down, and witnesses saw an explosion in the air. So it was believed that either a bomb was planted on the plane or it may have been shot down. There was some references to a Navy plane being in the area, and so it could have been shot down. And then there was equipment that was found sabotaged by investigators, although this didn't make it into the official investigation by the NTSB, National Transport Board, of one of the fuel valve having been sabotaged. But investigators found this out, and there was a huge cover-up. Like they didn't allow anyone near the crime scene. It wasn't a normal protocol of investigation. Evidence was suppressed. I think they moved to have the bodies immediately cremated, and that's the usual norm in assassinations and their cover-up, because they don't want proper forensic investigation of the bodies. Yeah, all the details are in that article. It's summarized, because I wrote an article on Substack that people can check out, my Substack, and it draws on, there are several books written on this topic, one by Paul Dawson and one by John Kerner. Now, these books didn't get a lot of publicity. They weren't big name presses. They're kind of small presses, as is usually the case, because for my book on assassinations, I've been reading, and there's a series I developed for Covert Action magazine. So I'm reading tons of books on assassinations, and they're often really good books where the author has done real serious research and investigation. But they're usually small presses, and they don't. I think that. I mean, we don't live in a complete totalitarian state where they bar publication or try and threaten the author. They just make sure it's with a small press and it doesn't get out there. It doesn't get reviewed in the New York Times, or it doesn't get out there in Barnes and Noble. But if you have Amazon, or you have, I use Interlibrary Loan, I can get these books. And when I read them, I assess the information, the argument, whether they marshal good evidence to back up their thesis. And that's what I'm trained to do. And a lot of these books do a very good job. And then there's some questions, they don't always know the full story or the full, who's the culprit. It's hard to piece together exactly who is behind this, but they can prove that there was foul play and that the official story was false and that there was a cover-up. And this case clearly fits the pattern.
Jeremy, could you talk about this exploratory meeting in the Tribeca Loft that JFK Jr. had with two individuals? One was Gary Ginsberg and the other was Roger Ailes.
Well, yes, it's clear he was using George as his, that brought him into the limelight, and it was becoming a very successful magazine. So he was also building, his public pedigree, and the timing was getting to be right. He was late 30s, and he felt now's the time to enter the political arena. He's got a public profile now. He's got a track record of success, because first he had been a lawyer with the district attorney's office in Manhattan. Now he's established a career as a successful magazine publisher. He's known. So, yeah, he formed an exploratory committee. And, yeah, we've been looking into the background. Gary Ginsberg was his friend at Brown University, but he worked for the Clintons, and he also worked for News Corp, which was owned by Rupert Murdoch. And he was allegedly close with Rupert Murdoch, and he was a liaison between Rupert Murdoch and Democrats. And Rupert Murdoch is, the founder of Fox News, as well as other media organizations, who's, extreme right wing. And there's strong evidence, and we heard from our CIA expert from Australia, Peter Osborne, had unearthed a lot of evidence of Rupert Murdoch's connection to the CIA and the theft of the Promise software, this computer software that the CIA used for its own nefarious purposes. He's
he's also connected to George Soros, who has a long-time relationship with the CIA also.
Yes, and the other advisor is Roger Ailes, who's a notorious right-wing figure, who's also was a key executive with Fox News. Now, one thing I think, my assessment, firstly, is that the Kennedys are not. There is this hero worship of the Kennedys. I think they are another. They come from the power elite. And you see his connection with these right-wing political operatives show that the Kennedys are not leftists. They're not people who, in some way, they would challenge the CIA. They came afoul of the CIA. I think that's why they were taken down. I don't see them as strong liberals. If you look at their record, they're not strong liberals. They have a checkered family history, but that's beside the point. In looking at the assassination, I think the main reason is that they were a threat to reopen the investigation into JFK and RFK assassination, which are connected, and they did have suspicion toward the CIA because of what they had done to their family. So I think the CIA saw them as a threat, that they would challenge the power of the CIA. And my study of the JFK presidency was that JFK was taking power away from the CIA, although he was still a cold warrior and he was still involved in a lot of shady covert operation. In fact, he admired James Bond, but he distrusted the CIA and elements in it, and he set up a special group on counterinsurgency to run covert operation and counterinsurgency operations headed by his brother Bobby Kennedy, and he appointed his own kind of people and gave the CIA a very limited role. And the CIA wants to have more and more, a greater role in running foreign policy. So they didn't trust the Kennedys from the time of JFK's presidency, and that's a reason the CIA was involved. Now we have more and more evidence of that in the JFK assassination. So the Kennedys are a target as a ruling class family. It doesn't mean they're necessarily morally pure or the greatest progressives, but they have this long adversarial relationship with the CIA. And the big threat, again, is exposing the CIA's role in the murders of JFK and
I think it's a little bit more than that, because this is also the time that George W. Bush is going to run for president. So having something come out against his father, this would be devastating. And I think, Jeremy and I could say that, when we talk about anything that's historic, we seem to get away with it. But anytime we've ever tried to talk about something that was actionable, that's where we run into a lot of problems. So if JFK Jr. was bringing out to light an issue with George Herbert Walker Bush, the father, at the time that the son is going to launch his campaign, that would definitely have blowback on his campaign. So that's certainly an actionable thing. So I think that was one thing to prevent. And then the other thing is Hillary Clinton and the timing of her senatorial, movement, when she had her exploratory meeting, when she actually announced that she was going to run. I mean, she announced her exploratory committee for the Senate on July 7th. On July 16th, John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane went down. I mean, that's not far apart. And, he was in discussions, I think it was in February of 1999, and, was mulling it over. He hadn't, really thrown his hat in the ring yet, but he had time. They didn't have to actually announce anything until the end of the year. So they had plenty of time to think about this. So, and the other thing that comes up, and Jeremy and I, we spent a lot of time this morning looking for it. That was one of the things we were working on, is getting direct information as to whether John F. Kennedy Jr. had information on Bill Clinton and MENA and Arkansas and the Iran-Contra stuff, and if he was going to reveal that information in George as well, which would have totally blown up Hillary Clinton's campaign. So really, there were two things that were, on the fire that could have gone off. And, Jeremy and I are looking into, actually, one of our, audience members wrote to me and said, how do you know Ailes and Ginsburg were on the level? How do you know that they weren't also like handlers or trying to manage George and keep an eye on John F. Kennedy Jr., that he wasn't going to do anything, terrible. So we were looking at that a lot this morning, and we have some inklings of stuff, but we don't have anything that we could really talk about. We have a lot of investigation to do, but it's possible that everyone involved might have ulterior motives, and one of the motives might be not to allow John F. Kennedy Jr. to do anything that would be actionable, that would either derail Clinton or Bush. Thank you.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. And I've, done research, on the Clintons for my book Warmonger, which I recommend. Details Clinton's long connection to the CIA, going back to his days at Oxford, and where he was a roommate with Strobe Talbot, whose family was connected to the CIA, and the two of them were sent on a mission to Russia to smuggle the memoirs of Nikita Khrushchev. And Cordmeyer Jr. said that Clinton was recruited into the CIA, and then as governor of Arkansas, he oversaw a massive CIA operation to arm the Nicaraguan Contras through arms smuggling flights out of Mina in the western part of the state that brought back in drugs. And the two Clintons, Hillary, with a senior partner in the Rose Law Firm, which represented the banking establishment in Arkansas that laundered the funds from this black operation. So there's a strong connection between both Bush and Clinton to the CIA. So they could have all been working hand in glove together. Saw Kennedy Jr., saw George Magazine as a threat. And they have the resources and ability to bring down airplanes, and they have a track record. And Americans should be aware of this cancer in our society, that we don't have a pure democracy, that we have these it can only be described as organized crime elements running society and engineering the political process and bumping out anyone who's a threat in any way to them. And that is not at all a model democracy. And we've got to build a movement to try and rein in this cancerous outgrowth in our society.
The other thing, I was very active in 1999. I lived in New York City, and so did John F. Kennedy Jr. And there was always a huge buzz around him in 1999. And at the time, I had a band that I was playing all over New York City as well. So, we would always hope that maybe John F. Kennedy Jr. would show up or go here or go there, that would bump into him. I mean, there was a real buzz on the street. Wherever he went, there was press and, and a lot of enthusiasm from young people who, really wanted, a Kennedy hero. And matter of fact, former New York State Democratic Chairman John Marino commented that if Kennedy entered the race, it would have been goodbye to anyone else. So that could be applied to a Senate run. It could be applied to a governor run. It could be applied to a presidential run. Whatever it is, he really did have that charm. The other thing is, I had picked up George Magazine in 1999. It was not like People Magazine. People Magazine is kind of a thin kind of publication. This was more along the lines of like a Vogue. It was thick. It was really like very, very thick pages, very glossy. And then he had very provocative covers that mixed, celebrities with politics. And it was really quite interesting. So it was a big buzz, especially in New York City. And Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, didn't have that buzz. People really didn't like Hillary Clinton. I can tell you that. I was there. They didn't like her. She just wasn't warm. She wasn't engaging. She wasn't believable. And, she was kind of forced down our throat. So, that was kind of the view at the time in New York City.
Yeah, very good insights. The Kennedy have that magic, none of us have. And however superficial to some extent they may be, they can galvanize youth. I mean, they do, often have a liberal message, and there's a perception that they would deliver in office. And I mean, yeah, that was the real threat, because this is a rock star. It's the equivalent of a political rock star. Bill Clinton had some had that it quality, but you're right, Hillary doesn't have it. In fact, she inspires a lot of hatred. I think a lot more hatred than Bill. And I live in near Arkansas, and I've interacted with a lot of Arkansans, and they really hate. They hate her. I mean, there's a real passionate hatred because of the hypocrisy. But yeah, I mean, Hillary just comes across as a complete phony, and so many people have known them, have come out and
Let's
said,
not hold back, Jeremy.
what's that? Well,
Let's
so
not hold
many have
back.
come out and said that they were totally different on and off the camera, that she was a monster. And this is people who've worked, the help in the Clintons' home and the government mansion.
This is coming from people who liked her.
I don't think they liked her, but they
joke.
said she was a monster. The real Hillary is a monster, and she's a complete phony. And then we've seen her record, I mean, of warmongering. And I mean, the Kennedys, and there was a shift that occurred with Robert Kennedy, in Vietnam, because the Kennedys were Cold War hawks to start. But then Robert, I mean, it may have been in part out of opportunism, saw the youth counterculture movement, saw that they can kind of channel that political energy into his election. So he became a dove on Vietnam, and he represented the hope of the counterculture and anti-Vietnam War movement. And so I think the younger Kennedys have kind of picked up that torch, and they are more anti-establishment. And, George was emblematic of that, and they represented some element of the counterculture, and they still have that star quality. So it's a potent force. And that's why, unfortunately, the dark elements have to expunge it through dirty mean, because if it was a fair election, these guys will win hands down. And I mean, we can get into the case of Edward Kennedy. I don't think he was quite as magnetic a speaker as some of the other Kennedys, but he had the name. Go ahead.
Before we go into Edward, I just wanted to read one quote that we have, and Jeremy and I spent all morning trying to track this one down. But it comes from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who this is his cousin, his first cousin, and they both have assassinated fathers, so they were reasonably close. And in 2023, he was speaking on a podcast, and we were trying to track that down. But he was saying allegedly that that George, John F. Kennedy Jr.'s magazine, could have been used to expose CIA crimes, and the agency allegedly feared his influence. So that's coming, and we're trying to track that one down. But I think it's I think it's timing. I think really the thing that the CIA wasn't afraid. It's that two campaigns could have been derailed. I think that actionable component is what made people concerned. Okay, Jeremy, please go back to Senator Kennedy.
Okay, well, yeah, and what we see is a pattern, and it's often framed in the media that this family, has experienced all this tragedy, but it's never specified that it's not just natural catastrophes that befell them, that these were political assassinations that the family experienced, and that there was a cancerous agency behind this that is never named in most of the media portrayal of the family tragedy. So, and Edward Kennedy was part of the dynasty, and he was a senator. He was quite sharp and eloquent. Again, he maybe didn't quite have the rock star quality of Robert Sr. or John, but he was in their league, and he got into the Senate. He was positioning himself as a pretty liberal figure in the Senate against the Vietnam War, and he was, after Robert was killed, he was the next in line. And the family had endless money. The father was known as the Wolf on Wall Street. Was one of the richest men in America, and made some of his money through illicit means. But in any event, so Edward Kennedy is rising, and then you have the Chappaquiddick incident in, was it 1969, 1970? I have to refresh on the date. I think 1969. And Kennedy was poised potentially to be the nominee for 72, and he probably would have done a lot better than Jordan McGovern because he had the Kennedy star quality. So in this case, the evidence looked like they set him up. I mean, what happened is that, the official story that he got drunk one night. He was at a party with some of Robert Kennedy's, boiler women, secretary, people who worked for Robert Kennedy, and they were having some kind of party on Cape Cod. And then allegedly Kennedy got drunk, and he was having all the affairs with these women. And one young woman, Mary Jo Kopechny, he drove off the pier in Cape Cod, and she drowned, but somehow he escaped. He survived by swimming, getting out of the car, some miraculously, and then swimming across the channel, and then reported it the next morning. And there was this whole cover-up. And in fact, there's a movie about this that recently came out on Netflix, painting Kennedy in very negative light, and that the Kennedy family handlers like Robert McNamara and Theodore Sorensen, who worked for John's presidency, had helped Teddy to cover all this up. But there are some books, one by an article by R.B. Cutler in a book on assassinations and conspiracy, that again, you have to assess: is there good evidence the author is presenting, or is this just some wild theory? Well, it turns out, if you read, few people read these books because they're taboo in academia. The mere mention of them, you get branded a conspiracy theorist and blacklisted and exiled to the equivalent of Siberia, or you lose your job immediately. So people don't even read it. But if you read, for instance, this article by R.B. Cutler, which I base my article on a lot, although I did other research too, but this article was very well argued and reasoned, and he made a number of points how the official story didn't make sense and was unlikely. And number one is that the speed of the car, Kennedy said, didn't match the forensics of the accident. Number two, the skid marks were off from the alleged route. Number
three, in a different direction, right?
Yeah, they went in a different direction. Number three, Kennedy knew that area like the back of his hand. He never would have driven off the road. Number four, he was a police officer. We have a police chief, Hook was his name, said he saw Kennedy at 12:50 p.m. that night when this accident had allegedly occurred at 11, and he saw three people in the car. And number four, the woman, they found blood on her shirt, and that the cause of death was asphyxiation, not drowning, and there was evidence of her having been beaten. And then other thing that he said, she was found in the back of the car. How could she? And the science was impossible. If the car had went into the pier, as they said, it would have been impossible for her to get to the front seat into the back. She would have been in the front because she would have been submerged. That was the assessment of professionals who looked at, and he was citing like some, professional investigators. So these were among the ones I can remember off the top of my head from his article. He had about 8 or 9 key points that it was an impossibility, the official story. And then they said it was impossible that if he had a night of drinking, there's no way he could have swum the channel in the way they said. He would have drowned. Even like an Olympic swimmer, maybe he could have done it, at his peak. And after a night of drinking, it would have been a Herculean feat to do, impossible for any normal human being, even an Olympian. Olympian would have to be like in his top form to do that. So these are the things I remember as to why the official story just makes no sense. And then there were some CIA people spotted there. E. Howard Hunt. What is E. Howard Hunt doing? around this scene. And, guys, he was involved in the Watergate burglary, and he was a notorious CIA dirty trick specialist. And another guy, Tony Ulasewicz, affiliated with the CIA dirty tricks, they were all there in Chappaquiddick. What were they doing there, if not setting up Kennedy? And Cutler quoted a CIA operative who said, well, you might think it's far-fetched, but this is what the CIA does. They sit around, they plan these kind of operations, and they love it. They get great joy out of it, and they're killing people. I mean, Mary Jo was murdered, this young woman, and then
I want to go back to Mary Jo just for a second. When you talk about the difference between drowning and asphyxiation, from a forensic medical examiner point of view, it's very clear cut. So I just want to bring this to our audience's attention. I mean, if you have water in the lungs, it's very different from you being asphyxiated. So it's very easy to tell if someone is killed before they're put in the water. So one of the theories is that she was murdered. And I think they also found concussive wounds in the back of her head.
Yeah, and they found alcohol in her system when she didn't drink.
Right.
All her friends said she never drank, including at that party. So it's believed they may have pumped her with alcohol just to break her down so they could then murder her.
So I just want to go back to that night a little bit. So, okay, so you have, these two people driving in the car. So one theory is that they, drove off the bridge and into the water. And then another theory is that somehow they were intercepted and harmed. And then he was not thrown in, but only she was. And one of the big things that people talk about in this is that he didn't report this until the next day. And I guess the allegations are, he didn't report it, and then it allowed whatever alcohol he had in his body to be, to be gone, so that it wouldn't be flagged to the police. So, I mean, that is a reasonable, concept. Maybe he really had to hide himself until his blood alcohol level was normal. That's one concept. The other concept is, what if he was drugged? What if he was harmed? And then he woke up from, some shot or some drug that they gave him. Now, Jeremy and I do a lot of shows on the CIA and various drugs and the poisoner in chief and all of these, things that they have that they can inject you with. So, I mean, if they injected her with some kind of alcohol or something, it's very possible that he was injected with something also, or slipped something, so that he was unconscious, and he really doesn't know how he got home. I think, right, Jeremy? He has no idea how he actually got home.
I think that's correct. Yeah, and
theories,
somebody may say, "Oh, that sounds far-fetched," but we know that they've done this. We know they experimented with this, and through the Operation MK Ultra, it's come out in documents. And in the JFK Jr. plane crash case, that's also one of the theories, is that there was some kind of Manchurian candidate of the people on the plane who carried out the explosion or sabotage, and that he had been manipulated through the Operation MK Ultra. And that's how they did it with Sirhan Sirhan, and that's quite well established in that case, as well as some other cases. So, people can scoff at this as a conspiracy all they want, and even to me, it sounds far-fetched, but truth is stranger than fiction, and we have the documentation about how they planned for this in the past. And so these would be textbook cases of implementing it, and they had a motive. They had a vendetta against the Kennedy family for reasons we've described. They had the motive, and they couldn't kill Teddy Kennedy because then it would look too suspicious that all these Kennedy were assassinated. So that's why they had to get more creative. They start with murdering John and Bobby, and they get more creative in setting up Teddy in this way. And that's the way to derail his political career and prevent him from ever getting to the presidency, reopening the Warren Commission. And then they resort to the plane crash, which is a way to deflect suspicion, because many will just say, oh, there was a small plane he was on, or, and they, with the JFK Jr., they spread a lot of disinformation in the media. And I mean, that's at the core of the issue in part here, that George was trying to break the CIA monopoly over the media. And, with the control of the media, they plant, and it's very subtle disinformation. They planted all these stories, came out after the crash, how JFK Jr. had all these health problems and he shouldn't have been flying, and that he was, they claimed, he wasn't himself before the flight. And it was just those kind of stories that were being implemented in various media, in some cases like magazine, like People. So people, they make the connection. Oh, pilot error. JFK was taking, and they said he was taking certain drugs because he had broken his leg a few months before. So that's what they focus stories on, and that's part of the CIA's game, to get people to believe that something was a bit off about him, and that he shouldn't have been flying, and that he crashed into the ground.
Well, another thing that was in your article, and also in some other research that I did, is the fact that the luggage was very far apart from where the plane was. So it seemed like there was some kind of an explosion, and luggage went in other locations, because if it just crashed, everything would pretty much be centered in that area.
And witnesses said they saw explosions at the precise time the plane went down. Several eyewitnesses said that, but then they were censored from the media.
And then the reconnaissance radar also picked up a flash.
Yeah.
Which is, really hard to get around. But let's go back to Edward Kennedy, or Ted Kennedy. What you were saying, which I also want to just highlight, is that just so happens that there's two high-level CIA guys right near the crash site. Can you talk a little bit about them again?
Well, this was part of the cover-up. I can't remember every detail, but there were a lot of irregularities, and that's the pattern I noticed in researching this book I'm developing, and hopefully I'll find a publisher. I'm looking for one currently. Is oddities and irregularities in the crime scene investigation, and the FBI is never involved when they're supposed to be. And they don't follow the normal protocol, and they suppress evidence, and the investigation is usually done very shoddy way, that any amateur who looks into it sees that the official report is leaving out so much to the story, and they're not following up leads like what you're saying. The luggage, there would be a clue that there's foul play, and that begs for more investigation, but they're not pursuing those investigations. And we've seen a general erosion in trust in law enforcement, in the media, and that's a symptom of the decay in our democracy. And I mean, that's why it's more valuable these days often to go on the internet, where you have independent citizens carry out their own investigations that are done better than these law enforcement agencies that have mammoth budgets and that are entrusted with the public responsibility, protecting the public and holding criminals accountable, and they're not doing that. So we have these case studies. It's interesting to study, but it points to a serious rot in a democratic system and in our society in general.
So a couple other things that we always say is, I looked at some of the other plane crashes, is that I think in every single one of them, there was no distress call. So, you think if Kennedy was having a problem, or any of these other pilots were having problems, that they would have, put in a distress call. They wouldn't sound like everything's peachy. So it's very surprising.
And to start to interrupt you, but in the Kennedy case, there was a call very shortly before the crash where he was very calm, and it seemed everything was going very smoothly with this flight.
So that seems to be the situation. Also, something that I've seen in all these other crashes as well too is there's no real good autopsies done. There's no preservation of the evidence. It's like everything's disposed of immediately. The bodies are disposed of immediately. It's really unusual how everything is handled. It's not, typical law enforcement practices or aviation practices or anything. Also, very often the black box is missing or it's got broken batteries. I think that was in this case too, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, it's a blur. I can't remember every last detail.
A lot of details.
This is a common pattern. Yeah, I agree with you that's a common pattern that you find.
Yeah.
That you find that some part in the plane was, like, I was just writing an article this week on the Ruther case. The altimeter was tampered with, and the official report said the altimeter was fine, which measures the distance to the ground. But then there was a civil lawsuit in this case. So the lawyer took it to a professional company to evaluate, and they found all kinds of defects with the altimeter and probable sabotage. And that wasn't mentioned in the official NTSB, National Transport Board, which does the investigation report. So, this is common. You find that in the Boggs case. You mentioned a number of these crashes, and I have chapters on all these cases. Wellstone, that was the Bush. Wellstone was a key vote for the Iraq War, and that appeared to be the Bush family with the CIA. This just follows that pattern. Yeah, you find some of the same things in this case with JFK Jr. And, these are great people, struck down his prime. He's 38 years old. He had the world. His wife was pregnant, and they killed her and her sister. And these are beautiful, successful professionals. His wife was a Morgan Stanley executive about to give birth. I mean, it just is so cruel, and these people have to be held accountable.
In Paul Wellstone's case, didn't it take out his entire family?
Yeah, and Paul Wellstone was a great guy. He's a hero in the state of Minnesota. Sorry. He fought for progressive values. He'd been a university professor. He was one of the good guys in politics. And yeah, they murdered his entire family. And there are other people sometimes on the plane as well. In the Ruther case, he was traveling with an architect. A very esteemed architect was murdered. And yeah, Hale Boggs was a congressman from the state of Louisiana who well regarded in the state of Louisiana, but he had been on the Warren Commission, and he actually was the one to tip off Jim Garrison that something was corrupt about the Warren Commission, and he prompted. Jim Garrison was the New Orleans attorney who was the hero of Oliver Stone's film JFK. It was Hale Boggs who tipped him off and prompted Garrison's investigation into the JFK assassination, and Boggs's plane went down in a very suspicious circumstance. So there's a pattern here, and you'd be blind not to see it.
Well, one thing, we have very little time left, but I just wanted to bring up some futuristic stuff as I like to do. And this is regarding this concept of kill switches. So all our pretty much modern cars are now getting kill switches. And the kill switches are, legitimately supposedly used to disable a car's motor so that if someone doesn't pay their bills, that the car can be repossessed, they can't drive the car. So there's this, alleged, reason for doing these kill switches. I think it's pretty chilling. But the CIA has expressed a great interest in the kill switches because actually they can control a car using this back door or this trap door electronics, and you can control a car basically with a cell phone that doesn't belong to you. You can disable the brakes, or you could disable the steering, or you could shut off the motor. So these are, or you could unlock the car. So these are like really fun things for the CIA as far as committing murders. So, I would predict we were going to see more car crashes where they don't want to have your typical, bullet in the head ending, or drug overdose or suicide. I think we will see more and more car crashes.
Well, we've seen already that that's a favored method because people don't question it as much. And Mac Wallace, in many cases I've looked at, and looking into this dark side of American politics, which I've been doing for the last 10 years or so, and it's been rather eye-opening at once, although also rather disturbing, extremely disturbing. And just what comes to mind off the top of my head, I mean, there are the case of Karen, there's a whistleblower in Oklahoma. Karen Silkwood, her car was pushed off the road. She had exposed the Kerr McGee, and some of it may be corporate interest. Kerr McGee was a pioneer in offshore oil drilling, and she exposed some of their bad environmental practices and was going to speak to a reporter with the New York Times, I believe, and her car was pushed off the road, and it was ruled an accident. I think they're making a movie. There's going to be a movie coming out very soon about her. Then Mac Wallace, he was an alleged hitman in the JFK assassination. He was LBJ's hitman, and he was involved in numerous murders in the state of Texas. He died in a mysterious car crash. Clint Peoples, who was the head of the Texas Rangers, who was investigating some of these Texas murders that Lyndon Johnson was involved in, he died in a very suspicious car crash. There's the case of Michael Hastings. Matthew Hastings was a Rolling Stone up-and-coming journalist who wrote a big piece on Stanley McChrystal, and that got McChrystal in a lot of trouble and got him fired by the Obama administration because he was insulting Obama. And he died in a car crash where his car somehow was driving 100 miles into a tree, 100 miles per hour into a tree in the middle of the night. Would somebody really do that after he just broke a huge story and was becoming a nationally renowned war correspondent? And he exposed the Prince of Death, Stanley McChrystal, who was running death squads in Afghanistan. And they gave McChrystal a job in leadership. Kind of joke academia has become. McChrystal is given a job in leadership at Yale. He's a Prince of Death who's a death squad operator, probably killed this successful young journalist who's a very talented journalist. So, I mean, just to build off what you're saying, Gloria, they've been doing this for years. That's how they do it, so that there's no wider investigation and people think, oh, it was a car crash, it was a plane crash, or it was a suicide. Those are their methods. And, the CIA, people can call us conspiracy theorists all they want. The fact of the matter is the CIA developed its own assassination manual, and they discussed some of these techniques. So who the conspiracy theorists? And we're trying to
both read the manual without knowing each other. How crazy is that?
Yeah, and there's the Frank Olson case. He died. It was a text mark. It fit exactly the blueprint they described in the manual of setting up a suicide. And he also died blunt force trauma to the head, just like I think Mary Kopechny. So they're following their own manual. And people have spoke out and said they do it. These are sadistic people who get joy out of applying these murders, because otherwise they'd be in prison. If this was regular life, they would be in prison for life or in a death penalty. And instead, they get to sit up in Langley and plot these acts, and it's fun for them, but it's not fun for the victims, and it's not fun for our society when any decent person, who's trying to ride popular movement, like you said, the Kennedy, they may not be perfect, but they're much better than some of the horrible leaders we've had, and they may actually follow through on some of the policies people want, and then they kill them. And they kill people in their family. And Paul Wellstone, you have a guy who really is doing, fighting the good fight, and he's trying to stop the Iraq War, and he's doing a lot of good things for the people of Minnesota, and they kill him. And this is just terrible for our society, and we've got to push back against this.
On that note, Jeremy, all I did want to say was that, yes, I do agree 1,000% the CIA has used car crashes. But now you can just do it with your cell phone. It's easier. So, and then you don't need to have another truck hit something or a car run another car off the road. It is less complicated. You don't have to crawl under it and disable something or put a bomb in it. It's easier. Just, boom, boom, boom on your phone. Okay, well, Jeremy, please tell our audience where we can find this lovely article that you just did on JFK Jr.
This article is found on my Substack, Too Hot for the Mainstream Media. Yeah, because these stories are, I guess, too hot. They're not publishing it. And then I write also for Covert Action Magazine, where I'm an editor, and I have my own personal website, jeremykuzmarov.com.
The opinions you hear are ours, and not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. That wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week.
All right, real quick before you guys get out of here, let me just share this. This is Jeremy's Substack, his article, Too Hot for the Mainstream Media, and you can find this on Substack. So when John F. Kennedy Jr. threatened to revive the Kennedy political dynasty 26 years ago, his plane went down amidst a cloud of suspicion. So everybody should go out to this website and check that out. You guys have anything else? I know, Gloria, you got to run. And
yeah,
Jeremy,
I got to head out. I'm gonna come out right now. Thank you,
Okay,
Jayme,
well, we
for
can have
everything.
a final meeting off camera, yeah.
All right. Well, this was a great show. I learned a lot because, I remember the JFK Jr. one because I was very much an adult at the time, but I don't know a lot about the Chappaquiddick incident, so it was very illuminating for me.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I didn't know too much either until I read this book and looked into it a little more after. So, because I watched this movie that was very critical of Kennedy, so I kind of believed it after watching the movie. But then I came across a chapter in a book that had a kind of methodical argument that this was a setup, and after I read that, it made more sense what he was saying.
Yeah, and I wrote off the JFK Jr. thing at the time, but now it doesn't take much to convince me that the CIA is involved.
Well, it's hard to follow. At the time, you don't get good information. You might just get an article or a clip on the news, and you don't really know the full story. But then these authors piece it together after 15, 20 years, but their book, gets barely any attention. So
yeah, and it's also like the Princess Diana thing too.
Yeah, it kind of looks suspicious, but you don't know all the details. So yeah,
we were watching football at the time when they announced that one, and I'm like, why do we care about the royal family on the other side of this? We're America. What do we care about that? But it is a big deal because I don't think that was legitimate either. I think they were murdered. But at the time, you just write it off. You're just like, whatever.
Yeah.
So, and also I kind of feel for the longest time, I felt the same way about the Kennedys. Like they're just American royalty and we don't have kings and queens here. I'm an American, screw the royals. That used to be my attitude.
Yeah, I think they are royalty, but I think that there was an inter-elite rivalry, and
Oh yeah, I think this stuff actually does matter now, but I used to just not care. So that's why I find this stuff to be absolutely fascinating. And having my work experience be what it is, I'm willing to believe anything when it comes to what the CIA is willing to do. Any crazy thing, I'm like, well, yeah, they probably do that. Sure. All right. Well, Jeremy, it's a great show. Thank you for joining us today. Let's go ahead and wrap this thing up.
Okay.
And we'll see you next week. I believe we have a guest next week. Is Celia coming on next week?
I think so. Yeah. Gloria set that up. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's going to be talking about something that's been coming up a lot lately with regards to weaponizing the weather. So
I don't know. Yeah.
I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But even that doesn't sound so crazy to me anymore like it used to. So
yeah. You think it's crazy until you look into it and
Yeah,
find
yeah,
that that's some good evidence for some of these
yeah.
things.
It's not like they control the weather, but they're able to manipulate it. Just takes a
Yeah,
little bit
they
to like.
do have that.
nudge-
I've come across that in some research I was doing on the Vietnam War, where they were
Mhm.
trying to intensify. They were using certain methods, like in the clouds, to intensify monsoons on Ho Chi Minh Trail. So
Yeah,
yeah, they couldn't manufacture the weather, but they were. That was 50 years ago, 60 years ago already,
yeah.
developing some technology to try and manipulate the weather.
Right. They have
I
better
don't know too
tools,
much
better.
about it, but I have
Yeah.
come across actual official documents about that. So.
If they figured out something that could work a little bit back then, they've had 50
Yeah,
years to
60
work on it
years to
and make
work
a
on it.
better tool to do more. So
Exactly.
it sounds like now they can use frequencies to create like these spaces in the atmosphere where when a natural it's you can't create weather, but you can manipulate weather. So a naturally occurring like storm could be intensified or redirected into a
Exactly.
different place.
Yeah.
um so that's what a lot of people are starting to think is really going on, and that maybe they're using this cloud seeding stuff as kind of like as a boogeyman when they're really doing like something with energy manipulation over here. So there's a lot of that stuff going on. This will be an interesting show to hear about. I'm still learning about it, but I'm not going to dismiss it like I used to. It's
Yeah.
now it's something I'm like, okay, let's learn about it. It might not be true, but at least let's get aware of it and start to wrap our brains around it. All right.
Definitely.
Well,
Okay.
let's wrap
Take
this
care,
up.
Jayme. See you
Thank you,
later.
Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody watching at home. We'll be back next week, and that I think is going to be an exciting show. And thanks to Gloria as well, but she did have to run because she's got to hit the road, and she was in New York, and she's got to get back home. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
To